All right, we're kicking off FarmQA's webinar series, and today we're going to be covering new features. So I appreciate everybody that was able to join. We're going to be talking through, like I said, the new features we've updated and added in the last few months, but we'll also hear an update from our CEO, Howard Dahl. So that will be the focus for today, and most of it will be a live demo. I'll be walking through the product itself and doing some product updates within the software. But we will start out with a slide from Howard. So as we're saying here, the agenda would be to hear from Howard, walk through our new features that have been released this quarter, or essentially from our last newsletter. And then we're going to talk about what's coming up that you guys can tune into, and then we'll end up with a poll. Just note on the poll, if you guys have some topics you guys want to hear me do a webinar series on, feel free to post that in the chat anytime. We're looking for content that our customers are interested in hearing. So we are very much open to your input on what you guys want to hear us talk about or cover. With that said, I want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to jump right into the presentation. So with that, we're going to hear from Howard, and we have a short video clip from him.
It's a pleasure to speak to friends, old friends, new friends, about FarmQA. FarmQA, or Farm Quality Assurance, was really a dream that I had with a couple friends a number of years ago, and based on the premise that you can only manage what you can measure, and you need to be able to address non-conformance as quickly as the reality of all quality systems. It's been gratifying to see the great steps our team has made in the past years, and this year with some really exciting new developments with analytics, integration with Planet, and a number of other things on the drawing board. Everything we do is by listening to real customers, and our business is making life better for agronomists, and we are deeply appreciative of the agronomists that have given us so much input and guidance over the past few years. We've tried to listen well, and I think the feedback we get says that we are listening very well. As in all software development, the wish list is greater than what we like at times, but each year we assess carefully what is most important, and I think we've done a very good job with that. This coming year, as we see much more emphasis on analytics and metrics, it's going to be important for us to work closely with our customers to make sure that some of the dreams that we've had are being realized. And so we deeply appreciate those of you who are part of our FarmQA family, and grateful for the, in some cases now, a 5-year relationship. For some of you who are looking at FarmQA, we don't think you'll be disappointed if you move our way, and we believe the promise is that you will have much happier farmers that you do scouting for, that you do agronomy work for, and it's going to increase the amount of work that you can get done in a day. And we always try to over-deliver and under-promise, and all the repeat customers we have would indicate to us that we're doing something right. And so we look forward to this coming year for some exciting growth opportunities for our FarmQA team. So thank you for listening.
That was the CEO of FarmQA and founder, Howard Dahl, and the visionary of the company. From here, we'll dive in to my portion, which is covering the new features that came out this quarter, so essentially the last 3 months. I'm going to start out by talking about our data import service. And so this is focused on 2 things. First of all, that would be the soil data import. So if any of the customers listening in now have soil data from a lab such as AgVice, Midwest Labs, what we're doing is we're taking a CSV file and importing that in, matching it based on the field name in the CSV file to what's in FarmQA, and then the data would be associated within our software platform. So the beauty of doing it that way is that we can work with any lab. So it's not directly through an integration at this point, but as you'll see, it is quite seamless to get that data into the platform. And then we have some pretty unique visualization tools that come along with that. The second piece on the data import is going to be metric import, and that's similar to the concept that I just described, but it's more focused on things like yield data, quality data that it's going to associate back to a field level. The next big piece that we did work on was some improvements to our scouting forms, and that would be adding what we call group questions and repeater questions. We'll be diving into what that means here in the presentation. And if we have time, I'm going to touch on some branded grower portals that we released, along with automated product totals that come with our field journals, or think of that as a year-end recap report that can be sent field by field. So with that, I think the product will speak for itself here as we dive in. So I'm going to jump over to a live demo. You should be seeing Munson Farms. We have field boundaries defined on our map view. But as I said, I'm going to focus initially on the soil import. So the thing to note initially is that this is a function that currently is going through the FarmQA support team. So as of today, if you want your soil data in your account, it can be sent to support@farmqa.com, and we can import it on your behalf free of charge. This very much is a feature we are looking to release once we figure out and work out all the kinks and work on the interface a little bit. So that is why I'm showing it. It is going to be user-facing here in the short term, and that is the goal. But for now, this is an internal tab that I have access to, but this is the interface that will be released eventually to our customer base. And what you're looking at here is the soil measurements import, but there's multiple steps to this. The first is that you would create a soil import profile. What that means in this case is that you are creating a key, if you will, between what attributes are within a CSV file and how you want them to match up and be visualized within FarmQA. What you're looking at here is an example of an import profile. So I've given it a name. I've designated who this profile is associated with. In this case, it's AgVice Laboratories. Within this, you can set, these would all be the columns that would be coming out of the CSV file. And so you could choose which column associates back to your grower name, your field names, your sample IDs. And this last option allows you to create pins that will be displayed on the map as to where those samples were collected geospatially. I will show an example Excel file so you can understand the correspondence a little better. So this would be the file that I was working with to create that profile, where you can see columns listed out for grower ID, farm name, field ID, followed by the actual lab results. So that is what is being used in the creation of the profiles. The next step after you set up the basic, the kind of pointing the attributes to the right grower field sample ID attributes, then we move on and you can designate which of the actual nutrients you're looking to import into FarmQA. You would simply select those, and on the next screen you have the opportunity to set up what units each of those soil nutrients associate with, the depth they were collected at, and a metric within FarmQA that you want that data stored with. These metrics can be created in real time within this soil import profile or ahead of time. So if you want to add that metric, this is an interface that can be added, and this would be a scenario where perhaps you import a lab result that contained zinc, but zinc wasn't a metric within your FarmQA analytics tab. You could create that from this view without having to back out and go into analytics. So within this, you would add a new, you'd use the existing category of soil, and then you could set up and designate a unit here as well. In the end, this is what your profile would look like. You would save that profile. And then the next step is once that's created, you can use that indefinitely going forward. Whenever you get a new file from a lab, you would simply come into the second portion of the importer. You would select within your grower farm field tree at what level this file associates with. So let's say this ag vice file is only associated to farmer A. You could select that grower. You could select the growing season you want the data to associate with. Now, if your CSV file has a sample collected date, we will use that first. If it doesn't contain a sampling date, you can default it to be a single date in FarmQA. So we'll just select a random date in October. And then at this point, we can click in the drop zone to locate your file, or simply drag and drop that into the import session. In this case, I won't proceed as I've already done the import, but then what you get is all of your sessions will show up that have been imported, and we will actually spit out a CSV file of all the accepted and rejected imports so that you can then reassess that CSV file, make any edits to perhaps the field names, and then re-import as a second, third, fourth try until you're able to get all that data in. And again, the key thing to note here is we are matching based on the field name, so that needs to match up between the CSV file and how the fields are named within FarmQA. So that is behind the scenes of how this works. The beauty of this is, again, we're agnostic towards the labs as long as you set up the profile that matches the files that you're going to be bringing in. And then going forward, you simply drag and drop the files into the drop zone, and it will use that profile to do the import process. Now, if there's questions along the way, please post those in the chat and we will address those at the end. You can have multiple profiles. So let's say you work for multiple labs or with multiple labs, or you might have a different soil package that you get tested from different labs. Maybe you have just an NPK package versus a petiole sample analysis package. You could have two profiles created for that. Then during the import process, you would pick between what profile you'd like to use for the import. Okay, that's the meat and potatoes of getting the data in. How the data actually is visualized in FarmQA, you can do that in multiple places. The first I'm going to show is from the map view. I mentioned there's a geomarker toggle on that we could display, and what that allowed us to do is now when we toggle on from our map details view, we can show the soil sample locations. So within this, we get the pins displayed of where we have samples collected. And if I zoom in on any one of these points, you can see that it spiders out to associate the fields the closer we get. But then in this case, this was data that I didn't have GPS coordinates for, so I used the centroid to place the samples. Once you click on any sample, it's going to show you the data that was captured with that sample when it was collected, and you can click through these from the map. Keep in mind that if you do have these geolocated, you would see them dispersed throughout the field opposed to stacked on top of each other. The other thing to note here is you can use the map time picker. So if these were samples that were collected throughout the year, you could look at the data from just the last month, the last year, or you could be using your growing season toggle. If this is data you have a single file that's being imported per season, you could see that data year over year from the map view using these toggles. So that's the first way you can see the data. The second way is through our soil tab. So on the soil tab, this is simply breaking down the lab results and showing it in a list view. So the benefits of seeing this data in this way is that you can see and break the data down from a similar time picker, but you can search. So if you know, for example, you've got a very specific report that you're looking for, you can simply search for it in the search box in the top right, click on that sample, and the data will be displayed. You can also see, for reference, where that point or that sample was collected from this mini map view. Now, I would say perhaps the best way to view the soil data is in our analytics capabilities. there's two ways that we're going to show this to you or present it to you within analytics. The first will be from this report tab. So if we look through, we see the metrics that we had created for our soil data, and we see each line here represents an individual field. And as I scroll through, we see the lab results. I could reorder this to be in a certain order. I could bring columns in and out if I wanted to remove iron, for example, from this report. But this is just a simple way to see that back in a table. One big difference here from just say a CSV file is that you can click into any one of these cells and see the data trend over time. So for example, nitrogen might be a better example, where this is clearly a dense data set where we had petiole samples collected weekly, but you could see the nitrogen levels over time for this particular field viewed from this report view. The second option is within the metric designer. So if you want to see this start to do more of an analytical comparison, this is going to be the place you'll want to go. What I've done is I've pre-created a couple of views, but I will show you how you create views. So what we're looking at now is I've chosen within my metric to display nitrogen. I've said to do that across all my growers, all my crops, and I'm currently displaying a line per field. So what this allows us to do is to see nitrogen consumption trends over the course of a season. If you want, you can toggle fields on and off if you have an outlier, or perhaps you're just looking at a particular field or set of fields. You can see how the map is automatically redrawing as we pull those fields out. So that's one view. The other option that we have with this is within this group by option, we can easily change this to group this by farm. I only have data in for my North Dakota farm, but another option would be to color this by crop or group it by crop. And now we're seeing those lines being generated per crop. So that is our line chart view. You can view that for any nutrient. So just for the sake of an example, you can see how you could toggle over to phosphorus. And now that data is being represented for phosphorus or for potassium. So those are the line chart comparisons, looking at different crops, fields, etc. A second view that I have created in here would be nitrogen consumption map. So what this is our field averages option. What that means is we are giving a field color to each field that represents the values that are being displayed. So in this case, this is a nitrogen level. You can see that 79.5, whereas this one is a much lower 39 ppm in this case, where now you can see as we play through time, if you want to see the entire, oh, sorry, I was on phosphorus, so I was misspeaking. We'll go over to nitrogen again, and now we'll show the full data set. So you can start and see before pre-plant, plenty of nitrogen was put down, but because of those petiole tests, and as we play this data set through time, we can actually see which fields are consuming nitrogen at what levels, and some of these got split applied, so you can see that they turn back to green. So it's a kind of a real-time look at which fields are depleted or sufficient in particular nutrients. And as I said, this was for nitrogen, but as you saw me kind of accidentally do before, you can quickly generate that as a phosphorus map or any other nutrient. So that's another option that comes along with this analytics view, is besides those line charts, you can also be showing this as a field averages map. Now, the last piece, this is very much in beta, so there's some kinks that need to be worked out. But once those views are created, you can create a dashboard of that data set. So if you want to now compare and have, let's say, a calcium line compared to a view that you had created for nitrogen, what you can do is display those as panels within our dashboard. So if I want to bring in that nitrogen consumption map, you can see I now added that into my dashboard. And for example, I could rearrange that if that is going to be my primary view that I want to show up first. You can now interact with that along with the other data sets as well. So this is beta, but this is coming, and it's a way that you can start to see higher level trends that's particular to your soil data that's been imported. Now, I want to focus on to the second piece that we've really focused time into, which was updates to our templates and our scouting forms. What I've done here is I've clicked on the scouting tab, templates, and I pre-created a template for this webinar. And what you're going to see me cover here is that I've got a section for plant conditions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 questions, and I'm going to showcase a new function that we have called a repeater. So what I'll do is, let's say we're looking at plant population assessments. So I'll create a question called plant populations, and let's say this range, we'll say that this range is set between 20,000 and 40,000 for corn. Now, the function I'm looking to point out is this allow multiple answers. So if this button is checked and you have a slider in here, this will automatically create, in this case, 3 answers within your template for population that you can answer and fill out. And then the output of that will automatically average that data. And I'll show that in a minute what that actually looks like on the scouting form. I'm going to create a second one for seed depth. And I'm doing this just so I can showcase what it looks like on a numeric slider versus the other option will be a keypad. So keep in mind that I'm setting this to 5 default answers and then 3 on the population. The other function that we added was group questions. So I'm going to add a category into my template called weeds. And now this is the new group question that's been added. The way this works is you can nest sub questions within the group. So there's a plus button here, which allows me to add a sub question. So I will add in the weeds. So let's just say we add in a couple of weed options, and let's say ragweed is a third, and we'll just put a couple others to build out the list. Now within here, we can also add follow-up questions for weed severity, and we'll have that as being none, low, medium, high. And then I also want a question for, let's say, weed height. I'm going to make that a numeric. So we'll go numeric weed height. And we can run this 0 through, let's just say, 30 inches. And then I'm going to complete this group with an open note section. So that is how you create the groups. And one thing to note is once those groups are created, you can choose one question to be a promoted question. And what that will do is it will essentially pivot the data when it displays in the final form, and it will show this as more or less the header or the most important sub question within the group. What I'm saying there will make a little bit more sense when I show the final report. Regardless, I will be saving this template, and we'll jump over and show you what that actually looks like on the scouting application. So if I simulate this as if it's running on a phone, excuse me, I'm going to sync. The app does auto sync periodically, and so those templates would get pushed out to your scouts if you had made those changes, but me forcing a sync pulls it in real time. In this case, I'm going to choose a template, and if you recall, I used the webinar template. Now, the things that we added, I'm just going to fill this out so the report looks a little bit more significant. We'll say the field looks good, but now the questions that I actually changed in here would be the plant populations. So before, previous to this new feature of repeaters, you could only have a single input per question. But now let's say I do plant populations and maybe you're assessing 3 different spots in a field. You could put in 3 different values. What you'll see here in the end is that this will then automatically average and show those values on the report as being averaged. Now the seed depth, if you recall, I also set this up, but I was showing this because it has 5 outputs or answer options opposed to 3. And then I had this set up as a slider opposed to the key in. So that's the biggest difference between those 2 questions. Now the weed is where I use the group question or created the group question. So if I click into my weeds, this is where I get the sub questions, if you will. And I can say I found kochia that was medium pressure, and let's say it was 14 inches tall. Now, the beauty of this group question, sorry, I should have made that a repeater. So let me go back into my weed question, allow multiple answers. I'm going to sync this one more time because I do want to showcase that ability that I forgot to highlight. So if I sync one more time, and we'll go back into the field, and we're going to start start that report again with a little webinar template, and I will fill out a couple of seed depth questions again just to showcase that. Going back to the weeds, picking up where we left off. So we saw kochia, medium severity, the height was 14. What I want to show here is now, let's say you see a second weed, you can define that as curly dock, high pressure, big weeds. And for the sake of the report, I'll do a third. We saw ragweed, maybe you saw low pressure, and then if you wanted to, you could put a note in here to say east half of field, high pressure. Well, we'll leave it, east half of the field. Now what we'll do is we'll submit this report. So this can immediately be viewed on the scouting app. If we go into the scouting report and we actually view this, we can customize what the output looks like, but this will generate a PDF. While that's loading, I'll also showcase that immediately in FarmQA, that same report can be pulled up and displayed. So that's within our scouting tab on the controller view. See if I get back in there, January 11th. That should pull up the report. There we go, it generated as a PDF. So you can see, in this case, I did have a recommendation on that field that's showing up first. But if you recall, I did the seed depth. I answered that 5 different times, but this is just showing the average across all 5 inputs. So it's doing that math for you. With the group questions, if you recall, I had the promoted question to be set up as the weed ID. And so you can see that as curly dock, kochia, ragweed. And now this is shown with the weed severity, weed height, and any notes I had associated with that. So this is a much more of a condensed way of showing that data when you look at the weed pressure. So those are 2 new options that we have in the scouting form, and really it's going to get you as a user, as an agronomist, to much more of a condensed report that you can show back to a grower. And one thing to note that we do is we will automatically order these questions based on the inputs. So you can see the curly dock showed up as high priority, would get bubbled up to the top so growers can see that and prioritize what they need to take care of. Here's the report view in controller that I was loading before, but you can see similar views. You just get that table shown in a similar way just within our controller web view format. Now, very briefly, we have just a few minutes. I do want to touch on, we added what we call branding into the product. And so this would be for grower portals. We don't work with CHS, but I just use their colors because that's a common color scheme. Really what this feature is this is the ability to skin FarmQA with different logos, colors, so it looks like a grower portal for you. And so what you have here is a splash page or a login screen that can be customized with logos and colors. And then once we log in as well, that will get us to an account that has your logo baked in, your colors all throughout the product. And so this is something for, again, think of the primary use case here being grower portals, grower logins that you can customize so that this looks like it's your internal software tool, you developed it. The only places you'll see FarmQA show up with this premium feature would be on the reports. You would see a Powered by FarmQA logo show up, but then other than that, the growers would come in, you could link this to your website, and this could be the grower portal. So that was a quick overview on this function. I won't go much deeper than that. This is a premium feature, but if you are interested, please reach out and we'd be happy to showcase what this could look like for anybody's customized output. With that, we are going to conclude. I think we're coming up on the half-hour time slot here. So I just wanted to circle back to our slides and we can talk through what's coming up. So we've got a couple webinars that will be coming up. So January 25th is the next webinar. On that one, I'm preparing you guys for the upcoming season, and we're going to do a deeper dive into customizing those scouting forms. So similar to what you felt today when we were going through the template designer with those group questions, but we'll go into that in more detail and make sure that you're comfortable making any changes that are necessary for the upcoming season. The recommendation webinar in February will be similar to that, but simply going into the recommendation functionality, setting up mixes, products. Then we're going to touch on our integrations in February, end of February. In the meantime, you can rewatch any of our previous webinar series on some of kind of just our basic walk through the product. And then questions, topic suggestions can go to info@farmqa.com. So we appreciate you tuning in today. As Howard mentioned, one thing that did come to light very recently here is we did integrate with planet imagery. So I will be covering that in a future webinar, but that is something that if in the meantime, that's something you're interested in, feel free to email me email info, and we can get you more information on that, as that is a very recent addition to the product that can be available to you in 2022. Okay, with that, we've got our blogs that you can read on our website. We've got our support page where you can review any of our content on how to do anything that I addressed today in more detail with bulleted point lists. And then lastly, we will be following up with any questions that anybody has on the call. You can see on the screen here how you can interact with Microsoft Teams to post those questions to me, and we will address those in real time. If there's no questions, I want to thank everybody that joined today. Please tune in to the future webinars, and we look forward to working with you in 2022. Thank you. Okay, I do see a question that came in. It said, will there be an option in the future for growers to get a notification when a report has been entered by the Scout? That is something that we've heard from several customers as a request. It is on our to-do list. So I can't speak to timelines on that, but just note that that is something we are looking into. Something to note there, and just to restate that would be when an agronomist, in this case, would send out a report from the mobile application from scouting. In my case, you can see how I submitted that report. It jumped into past reports. Right now, the grower can get a free view-only login to see that report on their own time, but as of today, they won't be notified when those new reports do come in. So that's something we are investigating and have on our to-do list. And so I can say that, Shelby, for now, that is on the list, but no timelines that I can provide on this current webinar. Note that these reports can be edited in real time. So if you do create, let's say, a group question, but you wanted to add additional content, you can see from this view, we can still see all the content, and perhaps you want to adjust the weed height or the severity rating. You can adjust those within group questions, save that, and then we will factor in and update in real time the reports. So that's an option, and then you could export out from controller an updated PDF if you want to send that out to the grower. With the soil import, one thing I can mention here is if you have data going back multiple years, if you send that to us as an individual file per growing season, then we can import that data year by year, and you can use our analytical tools to be graphing out that data set and seeing it year over year. So for example, if we look at my soil nitrate data, this was a dense data set, like I mentioned, with it being collected weekly. Instead of these dates being weeks, these could be years. So you could be seeing this same data set, perhaps even working with AgVice or Midwest Labs or A&L for the last 10 years. We can today bring in that data set with a file per year, and then you could see those trends over time using any of our visualization tools. So that is available right now with an import per year. I do see a second question that came in, so we will address that. The question is there an option to set a notification to rescout a field, say 1 week later? That is a fantastic question, and that is something that we have coming for the spring 2022. So unlike the other notification feature, this is something that's in the works now. We are adding in task capability. So within the left-hand side, you'll be seeing a new task icon appear, and that will address the question that was just asked of how do you know what to do when to scout next. So to visualize that, within our field tab, we do have columns that represent when things were planted, when they're harvested. I'll just group this by crop, and then when they were last scouted. So you can see the last scouted date. So like today, you could just visually see when things were last checked. And so you could, if you know you want to check everything in a week, you can see that easily. But the question of some fields you might want to check again in 3 days, some fields 7 days, some fields 10 days. With that task functionality, you could set at the end of a scouting report, you could set whatever date filter you want to say a recheck interval. And then in our task view, it would show you what tasks are coming up next. And so you could use that as your workflow within FarmQA in combination with those scouting reports. So that was a very timely question, as that is something that is certainly in the works as we speak, and something to be looking for the 2022 season. Another thing to note along those lines, just if I'll keep talking here while everybody thinks of questions, but within this view, if you want to see, like I was saying, the previous scouting reports, but something that we do have customers doing today is if they want to generate that as a cleaned up report that they want to send out internally, you can be removing columns. So let's say you wanted to remove the area and just have kind of a stripped down view here of what was scouted last. And I'll even remove the recommendations. There we go. So now this is a view where I've sorted this by scouted date and I have all my fields listed in one view. Now if I export that to Excel, this can be used for tasks today. So this is kind of a workaround, but if you have fields displayed here and you say, yeah, this is my demo data set, so the scouting dates are very recent, but you could say maybe you're going to assign this one to Ben, needs to scout this, needs to scout these three, and maybe Brian checks these. So this is a quick way where you can get to a format that you can then interact and work internally as a team today. But then, like I said, the task view would kind of replace this workflow once that gets implemented within FarmQA. The other thing I do like to point out as well when we talk about tasking, when things should be scouted next, I'm sorry, I got to find my correct window, is that if we go to the map view, and similar to how I displayed soil sample reports, you can also be turning on scouting reports on the map view. The reason I bring this up now is because I like to think of this view as a way to make sure that every field gets checked. So if it's something to sit back week over week, month over month, you can see which fields got checked. So what I have here is I've set my time filter to the past 30 days. And what I can do now is if I search this by corn in the top right, this filter, it snaps the map down to just show my corn fields. And so the scenario I'm trying to showcase here is if you are an agronomist and you're wanting to make sure that your team across however many scouts you have checked every cornfield in your operation, you can set this to the last 7 days or 30 days, like in my case, search this by corn, and now we visually see which fields have been missed, simply by knowing that there's no icons covering those fields. So that's another, think of it as high-level task management or making sure that things get covered. You can do that spatially through turning on that scouting report view and setting the proper date range.